Okay, so it worked. Running the clutch line beneath the master cylinder worked. It does actuate the clutch fork now. There's an inspection hole on the back side of the recipient area for the slave on the transmission and the bell housing. So you can actually look through that hole and watch the clutch fork move in and out as you push the pedal. So it does work. I may rework a few things. The firewall is moving in and out, maybe 1/4 of an inch or so as the clutch pedal is pushed in and out. So I might put a plate on this side to brace it, like a 16 gauge plate that I've got from doing other stuff. I might not, we'll see. I still gotta fire it up and see if it will disengage the clutch enough to shift gears without grinding, but the concept works. So that's that. Okay, we're gonna take it all apart and we're gonna rework a few things here. Keep in mind, you would not have to deal with any of this if you already had an existing hydraulic clutch setup. I do not, and I'm trying to be cheap about it and not buy $200, $300 pedals online for a hydraulic blazer or square body. I'm using all the 89 stuff. So I think I've mentioned this before, but all I did, the existing bracket right there from the mechanical drops down. Mechanical pedal bolts to it. There's 2 nuts welded on there. I cut off the top of my 89 hydraulic GMC pedal and I bolted it, drilled holes, bolted it to the mechanical deal. That's all fine, but that's where the rod right there bolts up to my pedal and goes into the firewall. There's not enough room. You need to space the pedal to the left, to the driver's side more. So right now I've got a paper clip. That's that little 2 things poking off of it wrapped around it. It's supposed to be a cotter pin. I got a paper clip wrapped around it so that when I push the clutch pedal in, it doesn't just pop off. But this rod, you can't tell right now. My pedal's here. There's a little thing sticking out there that way that the rod attaches to and goes that way with an eyelet right here. It really wants to be about another 1/2 inch to the driver's side. The eyelet really wants to be, right here an eyelet, wants to be more to the passenger, to the driver's side. However, the pedal, the little guy sticking out, doesn't extend far enough. So what I'm also gonna do, and it's at an angle too, it's going down to meet the firewall when it should be going straight. So what I'm gonna do is right there, that's where the stock thing comes through, and it's at an angle. I'm gonna drill a hole about right there in the pedal, put a bolt through it, weld it on the back side of my pedal because there's plenty of room, and then I'll do some sort of cotter pin or something that goes through that bolt that doesn't allow this pin or this rod to slip off like I'm having trouble with right now. But it's also gonna be, the geometry is gonna be right. It's not gonna be going at a downward angle like it is right now. It'll be going straight through the firewall, and it'll also be moved over 1/2 inch because I'm gonna put a longer bolt through it. And the hole is gonna be drilled somewhere around right there. I'll show you that when I do it. Now, the reason I'm doing a lot of this is because I want it to be reliable. Right now it does work if I wrap a paper clip, so i.e. I put a cotter pin on that. When I push the pedal in, all the way, the light's in the way, but when I push it all the way in, it doesn't fall off and it does actuate the clutch, and I think it works enough, but I need a little bit more travel. I've dealt with a lot of hydraulic clutches. It feels like it releases and catches right at the very bottom of my pedal throw. So I want it to be a little bit higher up so I have some room to play. And also, I need to plate the back side of the firewall because where the master cylinder is bolting up to all this, it's really wiggling about 1/4 of an inch every time I push the pedal in. If I do the pedal, 2,000 times, I think it's gonna crack the firewall and we're gonna have an issue. So I'm gonna plate the back side of the firewall. I'm gonna move this rod 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch to the driver's side with a bolt, and I'm gonna drop it down a bit. So that'll make this rod travel a lot further into the master cylinder, and then I can put some sort of a stop right there in my bracket wherever the pedal is hitting so that it doesn't travel too far and upset the master cylinder. But this does work, so I don't know what did it, whether the line needed to be below the master cylinder or not, but with the line running below the master cylinder fluid level, it works. It actually moves the clutch. The concept is going to work. I just got to tweak it a little bit further. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna unbolt the pedal, take out the sleigh or the master cylinder, all that stuff, pull out my bracket and adjust stuff. So here we go. Note to self, don't wear Crocs for any of this stuff. I have countless metal shards from the grinder, from the cutting wheel, from drilling. I have so many metal shards in my toes because there's holes everywhere. Stupid, don't wear Crocs. God. Okay, so there is the brace for the frame side. I traced it all. It's not, give me a second, right about there. So there's the hole for the slave, the master right there. There are the bolts. This is the cardboard template that I'm going to make. I spent about, I don't know, 20 minutes making this thing out of cardboard, and now I'm gonna trace it onto metal, 16 gauge. I'm gonna cut it out, drill the holes, and then I'm gonna grind off all the areas, and I'm gonna weld that plate to this. Then I'm gonna go on the inside, take the pedal off, drill a hole, reset it, and account for the extra 16 gauge amount of thickness to go through this firewall and wherever else it gets caught up on. I'll make sure the push rod goes through enough, but not too much. That's the idea. You just spend you know, hours of your life that you'll never get back making cardboard templates for this kind of stupid stuff. Otherwise, buy an expensive adapter. All right, that's what you call close enough. See all that nonsense right there? I'm just gonna cut it bigger than my pencil or Sharpie marks, because the idea here, it's a plate for bracing on the firewall. It can be a little bigger. I don't need these holes exact. They just gotta be somewhere and fit the bolts through it so that I can brace the firewall. Aha. Here is the final renditioning of the plate. I think it's actually gonna go, something like that. In the ballpark of that. It's already been grinded off. Everything under the hood. It's all been grinded, and I'm about to weld in the plate. The firewall plate is tack welded in. You can see all the tacks. That's the cardboard template I built. It's ready to be welded in the rest of the way. And that's what I've got so far. It's pretty solid. It's also very hot, so I'm not gonna touch it right now. But it's pretty hot, and we're gonna weld the rest of it in, and I think that'll be a solid enough brace. Here's the clutch setup. This is my pedal. Here's what I did here. That's just a bolt from Home Depot. Here's the existing rod that the push rod for the clutch sits over. We got a new bolt. I believe it's 5/16. I drilled a hole, stuck my bolt through. I did spot weld a little bit on the back side here. And there's my washer. Just so that it doesn't bounce off, but I've got it bolted down pretty well here, so I don't think it's gonna be an issue. This bolt is more acting as a spacer to push the clutch rod over a little bit so it lines up with the hole that I drilled in the firewall so that we don't get in the way of the master cylinder on the back side. Then I got a washer. Then the push rod goes through like that. And then another washer and then a bolt. And what I did here, you probably can't tell, but I did drill a hole through the end of my bolt so that I can just slip a cotter pin through it. So no matter how much vibrations and wiggling and what goes on underneath there, this is never going to just unthread itself and then fall off the rod. So that should be pretty good to go there. And now let's, we're gonna put it back in, and I wanna make sure our depth is right, and I think I covered this before, but I'm gonna go over it one more time with you guys. So, okay. You can see Can't really see that well. Maybe like this. Okay, so you see those two rods sticking down? This is the push rod, and those are the two bolts. Well, before I cut this thing apart, the max that it would push it is the nipple on this, so there is a nipple, like a little saucer basically, so the ring of Jupiter. Let's adjust this a bit. There we go. So that little ring, this is about the most that it should go out. The top of these threads should be the middle of that Jupiter ring or Saturn ring. So that's when your pedal is fully depressed. I'm recreating a bunch of stuff, so I'm gonna bolt this up to the firewall and I'll attach it to my pedal, and then I'll slide this through and see how far it goes and see if I need to create some sort of bump stop at the bottom of my pedal travel so that I don't end up going way too far and blowing out the master cylinder. So that's what I did. So let's re-bolt it all up. Okay, here is the concept. This has taken me a lot of time, but I think it's finally going to work. So this right here, this piece, these are the two holes. This is the push rod, or the two bolts, and there's the push rod. This goes through the firewall, something like this, right on the truck. This attaches to my pedal. So let's see. Say it goes through like that. This attaches to the pedal, and then it, gets pushed when you push in the clutch. And the idea here, what I did is when I lowered the rod on my pedal to push this and straightened out the push rod, the throw of the pedal got a lot further into the master than it's supposed to, or than I wanted it to. And that's obviously because I cut off all these plastic stopper pieces, these guys right here, that came with it. And if I were to put it back on, it wouldn't quite line up right. So what I did, you can kind of see this bolt thing right here that I stuck to the side. So I cut off a piece of the bracket. It's basically just a big, I don't know, a big piece. So there's the front of it. And these are the two bolts. My piece goes like this. It drops down, bolts to the actual bracket, and then it pops back up. And then I've got a bolt with a rubber bushing that's adjustable here. This is the adjustable bolt. Whether I thread it in more or less, I can back this screw in and out and make this sit at whatever depth I want. So this is actually gonna be my stop for the pedal. The pedal no longer lines up right with where it typically would have with this guy, the plastic button that it came with, because unfortunately it got pushed a little bit to the side when I bolted it to my other manual linkage clutch pedal. And it needed to be roughly 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches from this corner here. But if you take your old clutch pedal, little button here that lets the computer know the clutch is pushed in, when you depress the button all the way, that sits at right at about the same amount as the top of my bolt. So if I was sitting this right here, those are roughly the same. So that's what you can use to measure the distance of where your pedal should stop. My pedal ends up basically contacting right here on this bolt. I've got everything tightened up. I didn't have to weld anything on. I could have just welded this instead of drilling holes and using these bolts, but I had extra bolts, and I wanted to make it able to pull off if I need to. So I'm gonna button this back up, we'll attach it to the master, and we will see, we'll see what happens there. And there's the finished product in the truck. Pedals bolted on right there, and that's my little cotter pin with the bolts and the rod that goes into the firewall. So, pedal is done. I'm happy with it. It took me a ton of time, a lot of work, some welding, cutting, guessing, checking, measuring. But I think it's gonna last. I think it's gonna work like it's supposed to. I don't think we're gonna have an issue. So that's good. Yeah, you could definitely do this a lot easier if you just bought something, but you can do it with the donor truck parts.